Shout out to Vusi Thembekwayo, man. It's always amazing to listen to Vusi Thembekwayo. He has a lot of wisdom, he has a lot of knowledge, and is a very articulate, a brilliant speaker. And may God bless Vusi Thembekwayo. On a recent interview, but this is not recent as in yesterday, but like maybe 1 month ago, 4 weeks back, he was interviewed on one of the capitalist YouTube channels, and they were asking him about what does he think about the state of South Africa. He was sharing his thoughts, his brutal, honest thoughts as to what is happening in South Africa. Him explaining everything, even the illegal immigration happening in our country, even the cheap labor, even the unemployment, and he was exposing some very shocking information about the state of our country. Of course, I want you guys to listen to him. That's why I'm doing this video. Listen to what he had to say.
I like to think of myself as a person who's able to look at, as Jim Collins says, face the brutal facts. And I think if you look at the brutal facts, we have an economy that hasn't delivered the rates of growth that it has the potential to deliver. So, for instance, over the past quarter, our economy grew 0.4% in a like-for-like basis year on year, which is very poor for us. Over the past decade, our economy has grown at less than 1% per year. Of course, you've got to ring fence the numbers around COVID because there was a massive drop then and then a massive spike up. But if you normalize for that period, we've had a sub 1% economic GDP growth rate.
Well, that's stall speed.
You've got to consider that our population CAGR, I think, is at about 1.6% the last time I checked. So you've got a population growing at a rate faster than the economy. Then if you look at the other macro factors, the largest part of our demography is young people. And we have an unemployment rate of young people well above 42%. The unemployment rate in the country, by the broad definition, which for us includes people who've given up looking for work, is above 40%. The unemployment rate by the narrow definition is above 30%. And to put that in context, when Hitler seized power in Germany, the unemployment rate was just nearing that 20% mark, I think just marginally over. So we have been teetering on the brink of playing with some very, very dangerous macroeconomic factors. In addition to this, disenfranchised youth, lack of work, lack of job opportunities, porous borders, lots of immigration into the country.
From where?
From different parts of the continent, driven in part by a lot of the geopolitical issues in some of our neighboring countries. So, for instance, the issues around Zimbabwe are well known and well ventilated. So you've got Zimbabwe, you've had Mozambique, which had its own period of economic difficulty. Before that, had its own period of unrest. And a lot of that drives economic activity. Johannesburg still is the hub of the continent, and let nobody tell you different. I don't have the numbers offhand, but I read somewhere that if you just took Gauteng, which is the province in which Johannesburg is based, and you benchmarked it against other countries in the continent, it would still be somewhere in the top 10. And I might be wrong on the exact number, but it's somewhere high up there, which is to say that even without the instances of geopolitical unrest, the economic opportunities in Johannesburg alone attract a lot of migrant labor. Right. And so all of this feeds a country that is having difficulties, because you've got young people who come. I am in my family what we call a first generation. So first generation means first to university, probably first to start a formal business, first. I am that in my family. And I'm no exception. There are millions like me out there, right? And yet not all of us are given the same opportunities and pathways that I have been given. So you have this economy that's not growing. You then have migrant labor coming into the country. Some are documented, some undocumented, finding its way into the labor market. And you can begin to see how this creates a tension in society broadly. And then you add, in addition to this, the fiscal picture, Just, you've got to have a look at the books. The government has been running, and now they're in this program of constraining fiscal spending, cutting budgeting. The other day, the education minister announced that they're cutting spending in the education sector. She estimates that they will be in a position where they'll have to let some teachers go, which is not good if you look at our public education system, because it's already overburdened in our public education system. And so the fiscal picture doesn't look good, because you've got an economy that's not growing, a balance sheet that is not growing from a fiscus perspective. And then, of course, they've enacted a national health insurance. And I want to be clear, I'm a believer in the free market. There's no such thing as a pure free market. I think, and none of us who operate in the free market system can ever say, well, this market is so pure. But I'm a believer that the freer markets are, the better the opportunities people have to succeed. And ideologically, that isn't quite where South Africa's zeitgeist is. There's still a huge overhang of kind of that socialist conversation. And that drives, so you add all of these factors together and you begin to see the bubbling under the surface.
Well, how did this come about, this 40% unemployment and all the problems that you've discussed? How does this come about? Frankly, you point out that the unemployment rate was half of that when Hitler came to power. I think in the Great Depression, the highest unemployment rate in the U.S. was 28%.
That's right.
So,
that's right, yeah.
My goodness, 42% is just way over the top.
It really is. It really is. And there are some statisticians who are of the view that that number is still not an accurate reflection of what the realities on the ground are. But your question is quite pointed. How did it come about? And the difficulty, you'd be well versed in this, Bob, is the difficulty with the modern day is we have this tendency to simplify complex issues. This is a really complex issue. So there is a large part of it that is the apartheid overhang. The apartheid system was designed on an exclusionary framework and system. And here's how it worked, and I'll give you the 15-second breakdown.
No, go a little longer if you want, because I'm not sure everybody understands how it worked.
Because the people like me, who looked like me and came from where I came from, operated in an environment where by law there were certain things we were not able to do and certain jobs we were not able to have. And so this is in part why I'm saying in my family I would be the first person to reach a certain level of education. Because even though there might not have been a law saying if you are black you can't, the system was such that it was as near as makes no difference, impossible for you to reach that level of education in the first place. And so the system of apartheid is the direct translation into the English, was that there was an economy for the economy for white people in South Africa, and then an economy for the rest of the peoples of South Africa, the majority of which, over 70%, is black African, which I am. Then we have what we call Indians and Coloreds, who are a different race designate. But the economy was built in large part to support only this population of white people. Right? And so the rest of us then kind of function in other parts of the economic system, but predominantly my people, black African people, were the cheap labor into the economic system to get this economy to grow. And so that's the overhang. The missed opportunity is the government in power has had 30 years to really do meaningful transformation of this economy. This is to transform your network industries, build new infrastructure, bring a lot of investment into the country, modernize the economy, and in large part has missed that opportunity.
Why?
For several reasons. And again, complex, but for several reasons. One, self-interest, right? When you are a party as powerful as the incumbent was, I mean, at a point in time, there were close on 70% of the vote. When you're that powerful, there just isn't a lot of incentive for you to transform and to change, because your competitors, you know this in business, if you're 70% of market share and then, the other 30 players are the remaining 30%, you tend to approach things very, very differently. And so one of the things that's shifting now is they have had a steady decline over the most recent election, the sharpest decline. The governing party went from 57% of the vote to 40% of the vote, shedding 17%, do you think in business terms of their market share over a single 5-year period, is a marked difference. This changes the complexion, because now that they're at 40%, they're having to work with other parties.